Big Apple School podcast. This is Mike.
And my name is Vladimir.
And today we're talking about
Stereotypes.
So stereotypes, Vladimir. Can you define for me what stereotypes are?
Yes, well, stereotype is a set of images or set of beliefs that are commonly used to describe a person or a thing. Usually they are used when you describe people or a nation maybe, or ethnicity, something like that.
Why do you think they exist? Do you think this is just human nature to just assume what you've been told by other people? Is that what, stereotypes, sort of exist in all forms, right? Nations sometimes try to portray certain people in a certain way. Artists do. Almost always. They've been guilty of that. Today's society in the 21st century, we tend to see stereotypes as, are very, very bad things. They're things that you shouldn't be doing, right? So why do they exist? Why did they exist so prevalently? And why do they exist so prevalently today?
So stereotypes I think they are inherited to human nature. And it's like, according to psychologists, it's common for people to make generalizations. So people generalize about everything. So they start doing this when they are young, or even when they're children, babies, when their parents talk about them, just describe maybe something. Or then when a child goes to school, he or she starts practicing this, just making generalizations about things, about people, about things that he or she sees around him or her. So that's why I think stereotypes are quite common, and I would say it's inherited. And of course, they can be good or they can be bad. And you're right, I agree with you. Mostly we associate stereotypes with something bad. But if we talk about people, if we talk about nations, I think there are some good stereotypes. Maybe, some examples?
You're saying that this, let's just go back one notch on that. So you're saying that this is inherent in human nature. Do you think it's something to do with the easy processing of new things when we come across them, or new types of people when we come across them? Is there some kind of a survival mechanic that's built into our brains?
I think so, yes, because first of all, when a person starts, let's say, thinking about a thing or a person, first of all, and especially when we talk about something new, when a person comes across something new in his or her life, first maybe he or she tries to compare with his or her previous beliefs, or what he or she knows about that. And that's why this comparison leads to stereotyping.
So you think this is something, I always kind of saw it as kind of like a primitive way. So let's say a caveman goes out into the woods one day, and, we're all built around routines, right? So one day he goes to his forest that he's been to 1,000 times to go hunting, and he comes across a group of humans that he had never seen before, right? So, and they're of different skin color, they look different, they speak a different language, they have different tools and equipment. I have a feeling this is some sort of an inborn mechanic, stereotyping, to help us sort of deal with those situations that are out of routine, right? Because, people freak out when things are out of routine. As you can see, this coronavirus at the moment, right? People have been thrown out of routine, so they are freaking out around the world. Russians are taking this really well, actually, right? But I was talking to a friend of mine in Australia, and she was telling me how just people around her have just psychologically changed over this, right? So, for example, she lives with her partner and two other housemates, and they live in a house. And one of the housemates just went a little bit crazy, and she started controlling everything. Like, she would say, if there's a sofa in the living room, she would designate one spot, and only she can sit there. And if anybody sits there, she would scream and yell at people, right? And there's like a garage. There are 3 cars in the household, and there's a garage, and only she can use the garage doors and nobody else. right? That's one example. The other example is her father started becoming very controlling. He would go out every day, get a little bit of supplies, bring it back every day, and just to control the supplies at home. He had too much food in the house, but it didn't matter. He would just still go out, get a little bit, because he wants to control the situation, and he couldn't, because the world now dictates what he has to do, not he dictates how he wants to live. So I just feel that maybe stereotypes help us, when we come across situations that are out of routine, it might help us cope and deal with those situations, right? And maybe make a quick judgment, fight or flight, right?
Yes,
that's the sort of system, right? And if it's a fight, and this is one of the reasons why stereotypes can cause a lot of fights around the world, or flights, that we use stereotypes to stay away from certain people, or block them off from coming to us, or we fight them, we argue with them, we tell them, you're not good, get away from us, right? So stereotypes, I think, in nature, create conflict, right? And separation between people. And I think that's one of the reasons why in the 21st century, we don't like that, because we're supposed to live in a global age where people are supposed to open their borders. People are supposed to meet people who are different from us, right? So it goes against our current world culture. So I've always felt that way about, that's why people stereotype. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I wanted to add, for example, if we talk about ethnic stereotypes, some scientists or psychologists, they say that some of them may be positive, like, that it's a common belief that, let's say, Germans make good cars, or even if we talk about some kind of behavior, because I've even heard such a stereotype or maybe common belief that Canadians are polite. And I think, it's good. But on the other hand, I agree with you that nowadays we consider stereotypes as something negative because of that maybe stigmatized opinions or something like that, especially when we talk about race or age or gender. So, of course, they are negative in most cases, and you're right, they can cause conflicts.
Yeah, I mean, some stereotypes, you were talking about something that's mainly positive and negative. I've always felt that stereotypes, I don't know, I mean, are they positive? Are there any positive stereotypes?
Just considering maybe ethnic stereotypes.
Yeah.
But as for the rest of them, I mean, other types, like I mentioned, that are connected with race or maybe gender or skin color, well, of course, they're negative.
So give me one positive stereotype that you can think of.
As far as I mentioned, I can think of an ethnic stereotype, a couple of ethnic stereotypes.
Yeah, something that's positive.
For example, about Germans, right? Usually people believe or people think that Germans make good cars, and it's quite, it's quite known.
Right. So they use it to sell cars.
Yeah.
So it's good for them.
Yeah, right.
So it's good for them, for their marketing.
Yeah,
right.
Okay.
So do Germans make the best cars?
Of course, the majority of them, or I would say even the most of them, of course, are negative, and we should be critical. So we should think about that if we want to. For example, I like your example with that caveman. Because you see, when you see somebody who is different from you, of course, you start thinking, maybe people used to think that these people are different because they have a different skin color, they have different habits, different lifestyle. So that's why they're not good, because I'm different, yeah? But now we live in the world which is going global, and we live in globalization. So I think, of course, we should look at each aspect from different perspectives. So that's why we should be critical.
Okay.
Critical thinking is the key word here, I think.
So how does one escape judging others through stereotype? I mean, these things are pretty ingrained in us since we're kids, right? So I mean, how does one go about reversing stereotypes? I mean, right now, there is that, that movement around the world. I was talking to my friend from Australia, I was saying a couple of days ago, and she was telling me that the Black Lives Matter movement is so huge in Australia right now. And it's really, really strange because it is not an Australian movement. It is an American movement that somehow made its way globally to wherever Black people live, right? So I'm just wondering, and this whole thing is about reversing stereotypes, right? Reversing assumptions about other people, which can lead to disastrous consequences, especially violence, right?
Yes.
So how do we recondition a culture to get away from stereotyping? I mean, it's something that is ingrained within us. It might be, right? So how do you go against human nature, is my point.
Well, I think the key point, as far as I mentioned, it's critical thinking. And anyway, you shouldn't compare a person, for example, to some general beliefs that we know. And of course, we should value each person as he or she is, and don't think about just some common beliefs maybe, or don't think about some information that we had before. And of course, if we talk about getting rid of stereotypes, I think you should ask yourself that how would this person behave, or how you would behave in this at this particular moment, and see maybe some other circumstances, or think of some other things that are around us. I think anyway, you shouldn't judge a person comparing to some common beliefs or common characteristics, because every person is individual. Yes, and it's even dangerous to compare one person to a set of characteristics that we had before.
Right. I mean, the friend that I was speaking to, she asked a certain question to me, which I found very interesting. And she asked me, how are the race relations in Russia, right? The first thing I told her is, listen, I've only lived in Siberia so far, and Siberia is a very different place to, say, the western part of Russia, as I understand, right? So I can't speak for that. Yeah, nor can I speak for the Far East, only Siberia. And I told her, well, Siberians are incredibly welcoming of everybody, it seemed. It seems like to me, it's like, I don't know, I mean, it's very, very, the relations here is, it's like, it doesn't matter what ethnicity you are, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, I can tell that there has been hundreds of years of interethnic, interracial mixing of cultures and ethnicities in this country for so long that people just don't care so much anymore, right? Really don't care so much anymore, right? Whereas,
of course,
if you look at like English-speaking countries or even the Western European continents, right? They're dealing with this problem now, because this problem is actually fairly new for them. Different people coming into their borders and trying to intermingle and trying to work out the differences through stereotypes and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember in Sydney, like 3 German girls, I met them at a pub. And I was speaking to them. They were young girls, right? About 23, 24, college educated, right? Middle class, it's obvious. And they were telling me just how much they hate the Islamic immigrants that were coming into their country, because they were coming in, they were doing riots, they were hitting people in the streets, they were raping the girls, and the police didn't bother even protecting them, right? And it was so really weird because, in Sydney, we didn't really grow up in that. Right. That's a sort of, but in Germany, I could see even in a, sort of liberal arts educated, middle class, German girls, this thing was acceptable. Right. It was really strange. And this was all based on stereotypes. I could see the stereotypes playing in their heads. Right. Islamic men are rapists.
Yes,
They are disruption to our society, and we can never integrate Islam into our culture. Right, those were the stereotypes that were ingrained into them.
Yes.
And it's not something that started during childhood. It's something that started during adulthood, right? So even when you are told stereotypes as an adult, these things can play a powerful role in the way you interact with other people. Yeah. So I always found that in Russia, things are, I would say this is the least racist country I've ever been to. right? This is the least discriminatory country I've ever been to, right?
Yeah, because you're right. Because here, as you mentioned, well, historically we have a mix of different ethnicities, and you know that Russia has lots of ethnicities in it. Yeah, and that's why people live in peace. They're friendly towards each other, and we don't have such a problem because. And now when we look at such examples like we see in Europe or maybe in other countries, of course, it seems strange and like we have a question how it can be like this. Because, you gave a good example about those German girls because, well, even if they met those guys being adult people, but still maybe they had some beliefs that were given them during the childhood. And that's why, like, without interacting with those newcomers, right, they previously had a belief that they're bad guys and they should do or they would do this such bad things in their country.
Right.
But well, as for Russia, it's different. I mean, in terms of interethnic relationships, or maybe I can give you an example of Kazakhstan, because I was born in Kazakhstan and I lived there for many years. And people live, people are friendly because it's a multinational, not multinational, but maybe how to say?
Multi-ethnic?
Yes, multi-ethnic, that's the right word. It's a multi-ethnic countries, and people share their cultures with each other. They also borrow some things from other cultures, and it's a good mix. So here we have the same.
But, I've heard a completely different story about Kazakhstan from the Russians who have immigrated here from there, right? I run across quite a few of them in the last year, and they told me that when they were young, during the SSSR period, things were all good. Everybody were friends. Everybody was, they're all friendly to each other and whatnot. As soon as that regime collapsed and a new government came in, they started teaching some sort of ethno-nationalism that said that Kazakhs are the best and everybody else is not welcome or something. And then they saw that Kazakh people's, the native Kazakhs, their attitude towards different groups changed. And some people were quite, and there were fights and conflict and whatnot. And a lot of ethnic Russians ran from Kazakhstan to a city like Novosibirsk, and they've settled here, right? So, is that just a small outlier case, or are we talking about something? Yeah.
Well, of course, I think it's an exception because, you're right, and we can't say that everything is 100% right and, the best, yes?
Yeah.
So, of course, there are some problems, there are maybe some issues, but still, it's just, I would say it's an exception. They're not common, and I'm sure, 100% sure that. Well, maybe after the USSR collapsed, there was a period of hardship because people didn't have enough money to live and didn't have good jobs. So that's why they got angry, and maybe that was the reason.
They look for someone to blame. Right. That's the human nature part, right? They look for something to blame. So I looked into this because I was fascinated by this whole, the harmony, the relative incredible harmony you have here between different groups of people. And I'm gonna try to sort of jigsaw this together, and then correct me if I'm not correct, right? So the way this happened is that originally the western part of Russia, where the imperial seat was throned, which is Moscow and Leningrad, these places, right? They expanded their territory east through Siberia into the Far East. Right. Is that correct? And the first people that they conquered and integrated into their society were called the Tatars, and that was Kazan. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, it was but it was long ago. It was like in the in the 16th century.
But this is what I'm saying, that this all happened a long time ago, whereas other places around the world have to deal with this sort of in recent years, right? So Russia's had a longer time to integrate as they pushed eastwards, conquering more ethnic groups such as the Buryats and then the Yakutians and whatnot, right? That they had to integrate them into their society, teach them Russian language and whatnot. And this process took hundreds of years. And thus and then when it came to the Soviet government, they standardized everything, right? Their game was, let's standardize everyone. And the point, I suppose the representative point was that Stalin wasn't even Russian, right? He was actually Georgian, right? Okay. And my girlfriend put it this way: it didn't matter that he was Georgian. What mattered was that he was a good communist. Right? Yeah, right. So the people of Russia were more than willing to accept him as the leader, right? Because he was a great communist, right? Okay. Not because he was, some special ethnic group. Yeah. So if you look at that, whereas like the United States elected President Obama only about 10, 12 years ago. Yeah. So it took a long time, whereas, Stalin was, back like 70, 80 years now we're talking about. So Russia's had a much longer period to deal with differences, and the stereotypes don't matter as much. People joke about stereotypes here. They definitely do, right? They have a black sense of humor, right? They talk about other groups and make fun of them, right? In a sort of a nice way, in a nice jovial way, not in a nasty way, right? Yeah, right. So stereotypes do exist here, but they're not as damaging, right? Of course. They're not as damaging, right? Right,
and that's why the thing I'm telling you is that so sometimes stereotypes can be something more positive, yes? Yeah. Because people can play jokes, but it's good. I mean, they don't intend to harm other people or to hurt their feelings. So that's why, and actually I agree with you, because the longer the period of integration or maybe assimilation of other people, other peoples, let's say, yes, or other ethnicities into one country, so the better their relationships are, and the better this process is. I mean, the process of integration.
Yeah, but
if it happens so quick, and maybe within a decade, I think it's a short period of time, and of course, it can be dangerous because it's difficult to change people's minds, yes, the way they think. So you need a long time for that.
You need time for that, right? So it's just basically time we're talking about when it comes to stereotypes and their damaging effect, being dissipating away. Yeah, is through time. But there's one group here I noticed that is unanimously stereotyped incredibly badly and thus hated unanimously, right, by everyone I've ever met. Yeah. And this is so surprising to me. And this is what I told my friend in Australia, that it's weird. Everybody's very, very friendly here to everybody, and it's all very equal, right, ethnically. But when it comes to one group, this group is just hated, right? Gypsies.
Well, okay.
Yeah, gypsies, right? So I think their history is something like they came from India hundreds of years ago to Russian lands, and they were nomadic people. They lived in carriages and whatnot. Right. And then now they live sort of settled lives. They live in villages and whatnot in the cities. They have their own communes and stuff like that. But when I first came here, there were these people going through garbage. Yeah, right outside my apartment, they had a little stroller, just a little wheeled stroller, and they were putting things into that stroller from the garbage bin. I first thought they were garbage collectors, right? I didn't know what they were, at the beginning. They were slightly darker complexion, and they wore clothes that were a little bit different to everybody else. And then I went to the local Gruzhenka, right? And outside, there was a woman dressed completely differently, like very colorful in a way, almost like a robe, with a baby begging for money. Right? And I just kind of thought, they're very different here. Who are these people? So I asked Syrians that I've met here for the first time, and I said, who are these sort of folks that are hanging around here, right? And they sort of, collect garbage and they sort of beg on the streets, and they told me gypsies with like a disgust in their eyes. And I said, why? Okay. And then I started talking to more Siberians about them, and each time the response is the same. It is one of disgust, it's one of looking down on them. So I asked them, why is it that Russians are very, very ethnically, fair and equal, but when it comes to this one group, why is it that people don't like them, right? And they gave me a whole bunch of stereotypes about them, right? I mean, they revealed to me an entire stereotype, like how they're drug dealers and they don't integrate and they don't get educated. They don't even speak the language, and they've been here for hundreds of years. You know what I mean? And then they told me there are two kinds of gypsies. They're the ones who sing and dance, but they're all gone. They don't exist anymore. The only ones that are left are the ones who are begging or stealing, right? Or cheating people. And it was because I just kind of thought, wow, that is some mighty powerful stereotype you've got in your head right there about certain groups of people, right? About a certain group of people. So can you tell me a little bit about this? Where is this thing coming from? I mean, ultimately, it feels like a failure of integration. And it's a reminder, it's a painful reminder to Russians that they cannot always integrate everybody, possibly.
Well, as far as I see it, just historically, gypsies, they were nomads and they moved from one place to another. And they maybe the strange thing for me and for lots of people is that those people, I think, just if we talk about their feelings, about their satisfaction with their life, maybe they feel it's okay to do like this. Just, maybe that most of them used to be, or even they are, especially women, they're like fortune tellers, and they try to make money using this, I wouldn't say maybe technique or knowledge.
Right.
I even don't know what to call this, but other people don't like it when just one gypsy woman is running after you and just telling you, give me some money and I will tell you the future, something like that. Or maybe, of course, I agree that some people are stereotyping about them. Just they were maybe they used to steal horses in the past, or they did some bad things. They asked or they begged, they asked for money or something like that. But on the other hand, as far as I see it, maybe those people, they are okay with the current lifestyle they have, and they don't want to change anything in their life.
But shouldn't Russians be accepting of that?
Of course. You mean their way of life?
Yeah, if they want to live that way, that's their choice, right?
Well, of course, they should accept. But so here, yes, it comes to stereotypes and stereotyping. And maybe... I even don't. It's quite controversial. Yes, you're right. And sometimes you feel sorry for such people because they don't have enough money, they don't have good jobs, they are not accepted by most of the people. But on the other hand, when you see that they're okay with such a life that they have, and you think, well, it's their choice.
So you think that Russian society is a little bit conformist in nature? That we have a standard that accepts differences in society, differences in people.
Maybe,
but you must conform to this standard at least. So there's like a baseline.
Yeah, of course it depends on the person, but generally, yes, I think you're right.
And if you're out of this baseline, then you can kind of get stereotyped badly.
Kind of.
That's the risk, right. No, because I've got the nicest people around me that have those worst stereotypes about gypsies, right? And thus react really badly to them, right? In public, I've seen. So I was quite shocked by that. I mean, like Australia doesn't have that one group that we sort of tend to pick on, like one group that's sort of unanimously hated. It doesn't really have that, right? Everybody kind of keeps a smile to each other, may not like each other, but it's important to kind of try to be friends or pretend to be friends, right? That's sort of
at least pretend,
like a Cold War, right? Like a Cold War that's going on, and that's okay. As long as you don't have to like everybody, right? As long as you're willing to work with them, as long as you're willing to create a peaceful, harmonious society with them, I think we can be satisfied at this point, right? But when it comes to the gypsies here, there's no mercy given on that. Yeah, I just find that there's no quarter, no mercy, no peaceful resolution. It's literally their scum. Right, that's the reaction of the ordinary Siberian I've met here, right? So I was kind of really shocked by that.
Yeah, I think it's a problem not only for Siberia. I mean, when we talk about gypsy people,
right?
Because it's actually the same in I would say in all parts of Russia and other countries. Like, well, I saw the same in Kazakhstan when I was living there, and I know the same similar cases.
Yeah.
If we talk about European countries, especially maybe about Eastern Europe.
Right.
So
to wrap it up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so wrap it up here. I mean, how should we deal with stereotypes in society? How do we deal with them in the 21st century and beyond?
Okay, first of all, you should think critically. Don't try to judge people according to what people generally believe about this. You should think about a person as an individual, and of course try to, if you have an opportunity, if you have a chance, try to interact, to communicate with him or her, and because I think communication is a good way here. I mean, it's one of the means to solve this problem, to get rid of stereotypes. And maybe the second is that we should pay attention or take into account what our media do, or entertainment industry like movies or theater or other kinds of entertainment, and of course our educational institutions. They can be a solution as well.
Well, I think those were some wise words from Vladimir. Well, this has been the Big Apple School podcast. This is Mike.
And this is Vladimir.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Signing off.